The name's Gambit, mon ami.
Spoiler warning, Gambit has passed away. Long live Gambit. Fans of the legendary Cajun mutant could have felt that their world had collapsed following the horrific events of X-Men 97 Episode 5. Unfortunately, that's precisely the plan behind the most recent Marvel death. Beau DeMayo, the writer and creator of the show, as well as head director Beau DeMayo, have spoken candidly about how much of an impact they felt the Wild Sentinels attack on the mutant haven was going to have. Both say we haven't seen anything yet. For all of the fans who came to love the card-slinging Cajun cat following his memorable role in X-Men, the animated series, Gambit's passing was especially difficult. Because X-Men 97 Episode 5 was so wonderfully written, the outpouring of sadness for him was more intense than the response to Magneto's death, in part because there is a greater possibility that he escaped. It seemed as though Rogue and Gambit were about to finally be together, but it was taken away from us all with a flash of metal and a massive explosion of purple. "I feel like I can't feel you" was hardly suitable. We were all too aware of it. Subscribe to Movie Spy for more twist videos. The reasons X-Men 97 killed Gambit. The true beginning of X-Men animation. Whether you like it or not, there was a very specific narrative reason why Gambit died. The Genosha tragedy in X-Men 97 was, in the words of the show's creator, Beau DeMayo, X-Men, the animated series 9/11 moment, a deliberate admission that the world has experienced trauma that is too profound to ignore. X-Men 97 made the decision to radically alter the previous Saturday morning cartoon in order to represent that significant background rather than using overt, independent messaging. Following the episode's premiere, DeMayo came to X.com to discuss his life experiences, which helped shape the darker aspects of the show. For the adult X-Men TS audience, this episode was meant to be a somber wake-up call, a reflection of the common painful experiences that, even in the best of times, can't be disregarded as agents of change. At CinemaCon, head director Jake Castorina talked to Screen Rant about the choice to murder Gambit and Magneto, despite the fact that no characters had died in the original series. He also discussed the effect of such a trigger event on a larger superhero universe. In X-Men 97 Episode 5, Gambit's passing and the entire Genosha tragedy served as a springboard to examine how this world will handle unheard-of grief. The human world and the superhero world would not have been able to unite in a time of mutual mourning without this level of destruction. To put it simply, it had to hurt for it all to sink in. Why Gambit's death is so painful after years of trauma. The best times are what count. Gambit struck a chord with me as a young fan of X-Men, the animated series, as he did with countless other X-Men, and that connection led to a successful run of Marvel Comics, as I've already talked about. Something about the confident otherness of the telekinetic Cajun made perfect sense right away, catapulting him into the fandom's heart. And a great deal of that portrayal's success stemmed from his relationship with Rogue and their unfinished, protracted love story. Without going too far into hyperbole, Gambit was the X-Men's poster child in the 1990s, much like Wolverine has been ever since, without the occasional unintentional monopoly factor that came with Logan. The grumpier, older Wolverine from the animated series was not at all like the Hugh Jackman version of the character, and that never felt as unintentional as Fox might have us believe if they were asked. He was an anti-authoritarian without being a dick about it, a Lothario who impressively pushed his way into the inner X-Men circle. Gambit has suffered greatly from neglect ever since. Despite the fact that most live-action X-Men films choose not to use him at all, none have given him credit. Gambit and Cable were left behind when Grant Morrison introduced his new X-Men idea to revitalize the franchise. You can be too cool, it seems. And because I'm a huge admirer of Gambit, I found it quite comforting to have him back in the spotlight and to have a fresh appreciation for his intricate Rogue romance in X-Men 97. And now that he's gone, everything is lost. Gambit gave his life so that Rogue wouldn't, and the Cajun's passing perfectly rewarded his romantic devotion. Naturally, though, Gambit had to be the one. Gambit had to win for all the reasons listed above, as his composure was crucial to the success of X-Men, the animated series. Killing him off had a greater effect than killing off almost any other team member because he was a vital component of the show. Given his customary turn towards sadness following the Jean/Madeline Pryor discovery, Cyclops would have been too simple. Wolverine is a passenger, by purpose. Professor X has already left, and no one else, possibly Rogue, would have had quite the same dramatic significance. Of course, it would have been intriguing to murder Rogue, but X-Men 97's amazing amazing episode 5 accomplished something much more intriguing. It killed Magneto and set up Rogue to commit suicide by impairing her judgment. This brought the Magneto-Rogue Gambit conundrum to a whole new level. The final straw was when Gambit practically threw a motorcycle at Rogue to remove her from the firing line after she became overwhelmed with grief after seeing Magneto die. Specifically, that one instant meant Gambit's sacrifice made sense. Without being fatally stabbed, Gambit was never going to be able to defeat the Wild Sentinel without getting as close to the enormous enemy as possible. If he let the Wild Sentinel bleed him to death, it was the only way he could charge its own limb. He saw Rogue's decision to bravely die apart from her as the ultimate manifestation of his love. Remember that Remy thought she had chosen Magneto over him at this point, which was probably reinforced by her response to Eric's passing. Still, he offered himself as a sacrifice. To be honest, there will never be bliss again. Gambit's X-Men 97 death, the hidden redemption Gambit paid for the red in his ledger. Gambit's death also brought some atonement, even though no character should have to pay for the transgressions of another universe variation, let alone an iteration in a completely different medium. Perhaps inspired by E is for Extinction, X-Men 97's Genosha raid also featured a nod to the Marauders' killing of the Morlocks, a historical event that culminated in Uncanny X-Men number 350 by Steve Siegel, Joe Madureira, Andy Smith, and Tim Townsend. That issue revealed Gambit's involvement in organizing the Marauders and guiding the Morlocks to be slain, although unintentionally, at Mr. Sinister's command. Gambit had asked Sinister for assistance in managing his growing talents prior to becoming an X-Men, and Sinister had used the Cajun for his own purposes. He planned the Morlock genocide because he could not abide that Dark Beast had used his own technology from a different universe to make them. After being forced to pay for his involvement in the massacre, Gambit was temporarily banished from the X-Men. However, the character's transformation into an active guardian of the Morlocks in X-Men 97 seems to be a long overdue spiritual atonement for Gambit. Even if it might not have been deliberate, it seemed natural and gave his sacrifice an intriguing subplot.